Hi, I'm Kate Perdoni.
And I'm Michael Gadla.
Welcome back to Arts District from Rocky Mountain PBS.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. What about music?
Like at the Denver Art Museum, where music plays a huge part in the creation of exhibits.
Viewers learn how to listen to paintings in more ways than one.
That's right. The museum recently collaborated with the Denver Philharmonic Orchestra, developing a French impressionistic concert to complement a very special exhibit.
And if you haven't guessed, it's Claude Monet. The Truth of Nature exhibit features over 120 of Monet's paintings.
Many which have never been to America. Producer Rob Arnett takes us there.
You know, the arts at the time, they had cross-pollination. At the same time when the Impressionist movement was happening, there were impressionistic tendency in poetry and so in music. So artists at the time were not in a vacuum. And the music, because it responds to the same sort of stylistic tendency, we do believe that it helps our visitors immerse more in a time and go back in time. My name is Angelica Daneo. I am Chief Curator and Curator of European Art before 1900 at the Denver Art Museum. As we often do in exhibition, we actually include music throughout our galleries, and we did the same this time with our Claude Monet exhibition. We listen to music of the time and trying to find the right rhythm for certain paintings. You might have something that is very slow and sort of with a slower cadence, which doesn't go well with the scenes of Bordighera, which are an explosion of colors and an explosion of brilliance. So we do look at the paintings and we do listen into the music, and like any visitors, really try to look, does this help me when I look at this painting?
My name is Lawrence Golan, and I'm a symphony orchestra conductor, and I'm the music director of the Denver Philharmonic Orchestra. We have this wonderful partnership with the Denver Art Museum. The partnership revolves around the Monet exhibit. Obviously, they'll be having many wonderful paintings by the great French impressionistic painter Claude Monet. And we will be playing this French impressionistic concert. The impressionistic movement in music took place primarily in France around the turn of the last century, so around 1900. One thing the impressionistic composers were very concerned with was what is the emotion that the listener will feel. Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun is perhaps the quintessential impressionistic piece. It starts out with just flute solo by itself, with no accompaniment, and even the notes that Debussy chose for that opening solo are very chromatic, meaning it doesn't establish a key, it doesn't establish any one note as being more prominent. It just sort of meanders around through different notes. That is emblematic of Impressionism, both in music and in art, where we're not exactly sure what we're looking at or what we're listening to. It sounds very nice, but what exactly is that? With the French Impressionistic painters, similarly, they weren't trying to be very realistic with them. It was more like alluding to an image.
The painting behind my back is Boulevard des Capucines by Monet, painted around 1873. And it has all the qualities of this particular movement. And Monet does it with great effects, giving really the impression of a busy street. It doesn't define every single top hat. It doesn't define every single gown and petticoat. And so this was the criticism from the intellectuals that were favoring the Academy. This is the critic Louis Leroy, who was the one that gave the derogatory term Impressionism, who really criticized these black figures. In fact, he called them black tongue lickings. This looked unfinished. It looked too sketchy. But this was not the point of the Impressionists. They wanted to give the impression, the feeling of that scene in that moment.
That has translated into the music in a similar way. You get the impression of a certain structure or of a certain harmony, but it's not crystal clear.
When nowadays we visit exhibitions, we are seeing paintings that were not intended to be shown together in an exhibition space. And so we are mindful of creating some sort of context. We try to allow discreetly ourselves to immerse into a different era that had different perspectives and different experiences. So that will give a glimpse for a visitor into the time, into what have been the Paris that Monet in particular would have known.
In Paris at this time, the musicians would read the poems of the poets and they would go to the art exhibits of the painters and vice versa. So they were very much integrated. There's connection between art at the museum, between music at the hall, and in our entire community. We're all connected in many ways, and in this case specifically through the arts.
The piece did such a fantastic job of showing how disciplines can complement each other for a great experience. And I love that the curator used music to actually help place the paintings.
And gallery goers can hear the Denver Philharmonic in the headset of the guided audio tour.
You know, Denver is the only city in the country hosting this work by Monet. You can learn more at denverartmuseum.org.
And the Denver Philharmonic Orchestra season is in full swing. You can see their schedule online.